r/askReddit. What was hugely hyped up but flopped? Waterworld. Damn it, you beat me to it. I remember it had some ridiculous budget and took a long forever to make, and it went down hard. Poor Kevin Costner. The Super Bowl halftime show where they teased that they'd sing the SpongeBob song and then didn't. I bought a sweet victory shirt and everything. That was so sad too. The tribute should have been enough, but no kids complained that the Super Bowl didn't spend 4 minutes on fricking SpongeBob. I'm starting to think Tesla will start getting outpaced in the industry if they don't pick up their game a bit. Well, yes and no. Tesla has gotten to that holy grail place where owning a Tesla is a status symbol. Thus far, no other electric car company has done that. It's like when the iPad was new and had other Mo 3 players to compete with. Some were better, but the iPad managed to earn the cool factor, status symbol. As far as number of units sold, I'm with they're at risk of being surpassed. Not because their electric cars aren't the best, but more because Tesla has yet to bring a truly affordable electric vehicle to market. Anecdotally, I will say that at least on my area I see a ton of the electric Kia Soul and the electric Ford Mustang hatchback thing. A good friend of mine works in the electric propulsion field, and as he tells it, Tesla's battery, motor, and most importantly power management systems and software are apparently a generation ahead of the rest of the industry. That being said, that same friend says other electric car startups and companies that develops the propulsion and power systems are paging insane amounts of money to lure engineers away from Tesla as these companies try to catch up. What Tesla does is build an electric car that looks like a car. Most of the others are either tiny mothballs on wheels or another honkin' SUV. This is starting to change though, luckily. The fricking Ouya came onto Kickstarter talking about totally changing gaming. Small and medium-sized companies wanted to publish on it. Goddamn Best Buy was stocking it. Then the mask was off. An Android-flavored box top that didn't have enough power to emulate the N64 well, much less run serious games. Initially regretted not backing it, then breathed a huge sigh of relief. Hype was insane and totally misplaced. I had some friends that were convinced we'd be ditching our Xboxes for those. I'd never heard of it, but they donated like $100 each to the Kickstarter in order to get like early access. I remember them being specifically worried about not getting the names they wanted cause somebody else might take them all. Rise of the robots. I was going to put this myself, but thought that not many people will remember the hype. Due to the brain trying to skate over disappointing memories. The world-changing graphics of the robots that were not just cutscenes but were in-game play. Then endless delays, then the most awful release. It was terrible. That takes me back. So much hype in the PC mags of the time. The Edsel. It was supposed to be a technological showcase. It had an electronically operated push-button automatic transmission in 1958. The buttons were mounted on the steering wheel. It offered its own brand-specific engines. It was the car of the future. And it was only slightly more expensive than a Ford. But when it came out, you got an overly complicated Ford with a chrome vagina for a grille. It also didn't help that Chrysler had been offering its much more reliable and much less complicated mechanical push-button operated automatic transmissions since 1955. Even Plymouth's had it since 1956. The line was done by 1960 and is still seen as a complete failure. Oh, and the miracle push-button automatic only lasted 1 year and was replaced with a more conventional column shift. Wasn't it featured in Maniac Mansion? I asked my grandfather about them, since he worked on cars back in the day and built drag racing cars. He said they were pieces of junk. The US converting to the metric system. We'll get there eventually. We just gotta take it 1 inch at a time. Trump's impeachment lol. Twice. Or literally any of the "we got M this time" stories in the news. Zip disks. By all accounts, they should have destroyed CDs in the computing market. This was in 1994, when 3.5 floppies with a 1.4 megabytes capacity were still not all that uncommon for media delivery, although CDs were starting to dominate. Zip disks could hold up to 250 megabytes each at launch, and up to 750 megabytes later. Problem? Just too expensive to mass produce for distribution compared to CDs, ultimately. Software publishers went with the cheaper option and adopted CDs as their standard format. I loved my zip disk. I think I still have it somewhere in a cupboard. They were good for the time, that time was just relatively short. I've still got a home studio for musicians that uses 100 megabytes zip disks, couldn't use bigger ones. Would just run out of room if you wanted more than 3 minutes of 5 instruments. Cost me best part of a month's wages. Washing your hands is the primary mechanism for avoiding COVID. If the world embraces face coverings and homemade masks in March 2020, I truly believe we'd have far less cases today and COVID would not have been quite as economically devastating. Let's remember this for the next respiratory virus pandemic. The world needs to put their mask on the minute the WHO declares a pandemic next time. 50 years ago, popular mechanics and popular science talked endlessly about flying cars. Then, in the last few decades, aeroplanes went from barnstormers to sonic boom blasters. We played golf on the moon. The next logical step was for everyone to have their own flying machine, just like Ford did with the Model T/S. Park your own aircraft in your driveway next to the station wagon. Pick up a pack of cigarettes in 2 minutes. Cut your work commute from 1 hour to 5 minutes. Ford, Sikorsky, Bombardier, whomever, it's coming soon. Here come the 70s. It's not the flying part that's the problem. It's the bit where they stopped flying and under what circumstances. Every single toy my wife has bought for the cat. I still remember 3D TVs were supposed to be the next technological leap or something. Even the World Cup was broadcasted in 3D. Then it just died out. It was fun playing COD Black Ops in 3D on the PS3 back in the day. It was definitely a gimmick though, fun but made me worse at the game. I remember Black Ops 2 had that split screen feature where it's both screens blended together but your glasses split the images so you only see your own character. Shit wasn't the most clear picture, but shit was definitely badass. Holy shit, that's such a cool concept though. It's a shame that wasn't feasible enough to take off. Not just TV, but that era where every movie had a 3D version in theaters. As someone who wore glasses and is nearsighted, I was never able to watch them. Every movie having that one scene where something randomly goes right into the camera for the 3D effect. You can tell to this day if a movie had a 3D version or not. Random shit going directly into the screen. Mini CDs. Depends on where you were. In the US and Europe, it was a flop, but in Japan, it was a big success, lasting well past the launch of the iPod. As any good 80s kid can tell you, new Coke. Yep. The level of hype versus how hard it flopped dwarfs everything else in this thread. The conspiracy theory is it was a ploy to remarket Coke as Coke Classic. The end of the world in 2012. My cousin texted me the day that we were all supposed to die. She said, "Is anything happening?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" "No, nothing is happening," she really said. "Oh, well, you live in a time zone ahead of us by 2 hours. I thought stuff would happen over there on the East Coast first." I fricking died. The thought of the world imploding on itself but still following time zones is fantastic. Feels the same as the "why didn't Europe warn us of 9/11, they had a 6-hour head start" joke lol. I actually broke up with my girlfriend at the time because she wouldn't shut up about how the world was going to end because the magnetic poles were going to flip and the Mayans had predicted it. I loved her, but I eventually just came to the realization that she was a fricking idiot and we had no future together. She was also very into Kony 2012, which was extremely cringe. My ex legitimately got pissed at me because I wouldn't steal my dad's guns and go into hiding with him for 2012. I feel your pain. Edit. A few people have asked, so here it goes. He didn't think the world was going to end like an apocalypse, he thought people were going to lose their minds more like a zombie apocalypse. I did not steal any guns or go into hiding, it was a super awkward conversation, and then we acted like everything was perfectly normal the entire day. He later went on to think that Sandy Hook was a false flag and lizard people were the cause of the Aurora shooting, so he was a real gem. Wonder if those people felt legit dumb and learned a valuable lesson once 2013 came around, or if they just upped the date or made some excuse for it not happening then. I moved in with my brother and his girl last summer 2020. They were like this about QAnon. They would say stupid shit like JFK Jr. will come back from the dead to lead the New World Order. They had a party one day when they thought Princess Diana was going to come back and announce she faked her death that day. They took out all these loans and pretty much bankrupted themselves because they thought the world was going to transform into quantum finance, and people would only work if they wanted to and not because they had to. When you questioned them on basic things, they'd start screaming and say that I was a sheep living in the Matrix. So what I did was, after about 6 weeks, I found a room to rent somewhere and just disappeared. I couldn't take their shit anymore. They started getting chased by debt collectors and started saying it was my fault because of my negative energy. Man, people who believe that kind of shit legitimately scare me. Like, what kind of mental gymnastics do you have to be doing to believe that kind of garbage? People like that simply make no attempt to look at things logically. In that mental state, you can easily believe whatever story you like best. Unsurprisingly, the falsehood they latched onto supports their reckless spending habits and promises them they won't have to work soon. Crystal Pepsi. Crystal Pepsi taught me that everything is a lie. If they can make Pepsi clear or whatever color they want, then what other lies have I been led to believe? Quibi. That streaming service with nothing over 10 minutes. Launched about 3 weeks after the world shut down. Did anyone other than the company hype up Quibi? That thing had disaster written all over it the moment it was announced, and everyone seemed in agreement about that. The actual market data showed that the people that watched things on in generally found the shows to be good, but its retention after the 1-month trial was abysmal. I was in film school when it was released. We had to get it to talk about the future of streaming. I watched 2 episodes of something, then canceled my account. Edit. Copied and pasted from my comment below. The point of the assignment was never to tell us it was the future of streaming, it was to start a conversation on where streaming was going. It was a service different than the rest, and many of us agreed it didn't work. And then they canceled the whole service a couple months later, lol. I never had any idea how much it raised. How in the name did people buy into it this much from an investor standpoint? From Wikipedia. The service raised $1.75 billion from investors. It launched in April 2020, but shut down in December 2020 after falling short of its subscriber projections. In January 2021, Quibi's content library was sold to Roku, Inc. for less than $100 million. The 2018 Slender Man movie, I remember before it came out it had like a 92% want to see on Rotten Tomatoes. After it came out it got a 17% liked it. Honestly, the movie shouldn't have been PG-13. An R rating, which as far as I know was actually the original focus, would have been much better, as then the movie would have been more like the creepypasta and not like a child's fanfiction. It sucks the R rating was cut, but would someone think of the children? Your problem is with creepypasta films is that a massive chunk of your main audience is 13 to 18. Also, after the girls attempted to murder their friend, the film was basically fricked. They had to cut like 60% of it out to release it. The Nivelle offensive, it was hyped to win WW1 for France in 48 hours. Instead, it was so bad that it started a mutiny, got Nivelle fired, and had casualty numbers an order of magnitude higher than expected. WW1 as a whole was overhyped. From Over by Christmas to I haven't seen my family in 4 years. Come on Europe. 20-minute adventure, in and out. The Segway Google Glass. There was a kid at the K-12 school I attended with cerebral palsy who used a Segway as a mobility assistance device. Most sensible use of one I've personally witnessed, though I suppose trying to expand the market into able-bodied people helped production. I think the Segway was originally meant as a mobility device. The inventor is known for creating high-tech mobility aids. It was supposed to revolutionize transportation. Future cities would be designed around it. They kept it a huge secret before the reveal, but had tech journalists super pumped for it. And then all it ends up being used for is mall cops. This decade being the Roaring Twenties. Well, the last Roaring Twenties didn't end well. Maybe this one will be opposite and end great. 1920s started with a pandemic, roar, and had a massive market crash in the end. I'm holding out for the market crash because I'm pretty sure it's the only way I'll ever be able to afford a house. Fyre Festival is the ultimate hype but flopped. It's a cautionary tale of what not to do when organizing and/or promoting something. It's really just a cautionary tale not to scam people. Its organization and promotion worked totally efficiently, but it was a scam from start to end. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked and we wouldn't be talking about it today. The documentary Woodstock 1999, on HBO Max, was fricking crazy and another example of what not to do. They tried so hard to give it the peace and love vibes of Woodstock 1969, but all the main artists were nu metal like Limp Bizkit. It was a shit show. 1999 was the first year of Coachella, and they did everything they needed to not be a Woodstock 1999. What stood out to me from Woodstock 99 was the power of intention. The original Woodstock peace and love vibes were directly correlated to the Vietnam War counterculture. Woodstock 1999 was, as portrayed in the doc, trying to monetize nostalgia with no other real intention. Juicero, the ultimate culmination of unicorn companies that make no sense. I didn't and still don't understand how that thing got so much investment. It wasn't a juicer, it was a packet presser. Let us not forget, it was a packet presser with a DRM system to make sure you only used their juice packets. I remember Google Glasses were supposed to be the next big thing, but let me tell you, I haven't seen a single pair out in the wild. And I haven't seen a single pair out in the wild, and they were never released to the public. I believe there were only a handful of developer editions. They still make them for commercial use. Very useful in warehouses. https://www.google.com/glass/start/. Not a total flop per se, but Drake Bell's music career. Both Nickelodeon and Universal tried to make him into a pop star, but it never quite happened. He's still only known for Drake and Josh, and some unfortunate other things. Edit. I'm aware his music was successful in Mexico. To take it one step further, I would also list Victoria Justice in the same mold. To be fair, while she never got arrested or reportedly lived in Disney World like Drake, her career didn't have trajectory her peers did. Victorious was designed from the get-go for Nick to launch their own star in the vein of what Hannah Montana did for Disney and Miley Cyrus, but with Victoria. However, Ariana Grande was the breakout star from the show, and afterwards her musical career launched into the stratosphere. And even then, while technically Ariana is the breakout star from the show, it'd be more accurate to say her career got big in spite of Victorious, not because of it. It was only really once Ariana had moved away from Victorious and her Cat Valentine image that her career took off. Her first single, where she still had the cat image and was a very cat song, as Ariana has said herself, was a flop, and Ariana herself can't stand the song. Atkins diet-esque food items at fast food restaurants in like 2008 or whatever it was. They came and they went like the wind. I remember KFC tried to get in the game at the time by claiming their chicken was healthy because it was low in carbs. That went down like a lead balloon. I remember one of KFC's lame TV commercials at the time. Some dude was standing outside on a sunny day in gym clothes eating KFC, and some other dude just walks on screen out of nowhere. "Hey Dave, you look great. What you been doing?" Dave's like, "Eatin' chicken." The final season of Game of Thrones. My wife and I were very late to the GOT party. We watched the whole series for the first time during the COVID lockdown. We watched it knowing the last season was a huge disappointment to fans, but thought, how bad could it really be? Everyone still recommends watching it. Even knowing it was a letdown, we were still let down. Way worse than I thought a show of that caliber go be. Now remember, it was actually worse on release. The long night episodes were actually so dark that a lot of people couldn't see anything. For me, it was so dark that my TV faded the picture to black, so I had to constantly move my mouse to see anything at all. I streamed from my laptop. Apparently, they at least alleviated those issues. To be fair, it started to get bad before the final season. But I still had hope. And it was dashed so bad people don't talk about the show anymore. It erased itself from the culture sphere, which, considering how dominant it was before, is actually kind of impressive. Game of Thrones was going to be generation defining, kinda like Lost was. And when you recall that Lost also ended on a controversial finale, it's that much more interesting that God is even more forgotten in a shorter amount of time. Yeah, that show went from major cultural phenomenon that everyone was constantly talking about to completely forgotten about over the course of like 3 weeks. Area 51 raid. Lol, I was actually looking forward to it. Then I never heard anything about so it just dropped from my memory. There was one Naruto runner who actually ran back and forth though. My guy. I always picture some high-ranking general asking what the guy was doing, and some low-ranking soldier has to come into a room and explain a Naruto runner to him. That thought always makes me laugh. I swear there's a video where some high-ranking dude actually had to brief a whole room of security guys or something about the raid, and at one point there's a slide about the Naruto run. I gotta look this up, I hope it's real, I don't want to look crazy about this. That David Copperfield special where he made the Statue of Liberty disappear. Frick that shit. I remember when this happened. My stepdad at the time declared David Copperfield was in league with the devil and we weren't allowed to watch any more of his programming. LMAO reminds me of this time back in the day I was at my best friend's house watching Criss Angel. His family were religious fanatics. His older brother came in the room and watched Criss Angel teleport through a pane of glass, immediately grabbed the remote, turned off the TV and then gave us a lecture about how Criss Angel was obviously demonic. Then told us we shouldn't watch it because demons would come through the TV and infect the house. Thai Beanie Babies. Everyone thought they were going to be rich when I was in high school. At the height of the craze, an obnoxious morning DJ said he was going to cut one open to find out what was inside, and the way people reacted, you'd have thought he was going to cut one of his children open to find out what was inside. The war on drugs. I would like to congratulate drugs for winning the war on drugs. Thanks, the CIA. From what I've heard from most Broadway fans is the appeal of the musical was in the dance numbers. Not the plot. It was a horrible musical to try adapt. They should have just gone with a low-budget approach. They might have broken even just from Broadway fans. But a budget of several $100 million was never going to be successful. Not the plot. I saw Cats in a theater when it was still a fairly big thing, and when I left I could not have told you what the plot was at all. It is about a cult of cats gathering to decide which one is worthy enough to be killed and reincarnated. Cat Heaven, the Heaviside layer, has one opening. A bunch of cats state their case to get in. They choose one at the very end. That's my description. Being an adult. Yeah, turns out being an adult just means Googling how to do stuff instead of asking your parents. All the adults I was around as a kid told me to enjoy being a kid and that being an adult was hard. Did you have adults telling you that life as an adult was totally awesome? Kids kinda hype it up to each other. Quicksand. My childhood fear is non-existent. Dude, that's what I thought, and then I actually got stuck in quicksand one time and it was pretty terrifying. You can't just give this answer without details. Was it wet? Where was it? How long were you there? How did you get out? Answers. I was exploring the bottom of a lake bed that had been recently drained because of some work being done on the dam. I was walking on some dry cracked mud which quickly became wet, and within another step or two I had suddenly plunged knee deep into the mud. Every time I tried to pull my foot out, the suction was stronger. I struggled for several minutes and started to panic a bit. Eventually I was able to pull one foot out and put it on a nearby tree branch, which gave me enough stability to pull the other foot out. Had that not worked, I probably would have gone fully horizontal and tried to crawl my way out. When the Segway came out, I remember an expert on Good Morning America saying that they would design cities around it in the future, instead of cars. Before it was called a Segway, it was referred to as the thing, and new information about it was treated like fricking nuclear codes. A family in my neighborhood has some. At least they are similar to Segways, but don't have handles. The post goes up past the knees and just stops. I don't understand the design. Anyway, they fly down our street on them, mom, dad, and 2 or 3 kids. The dad usually has a beer in his hand and both parents are smoking cigarettes. It's really a sight to behold. I saw, way out in the country, a guy on some sort of off-road version in front of a huge dairy farm. It was actually kind of a cool idea. He had a big clipboard, so I guess he was checking the cows and such. The president of the company died in an off-road Segway accident. Not even joking. The big government will reveal all UFO information couple months back. I'm not sure what people expected. The definition of UFO is unidentified. If they were identified as alien spacecrafts, they wouldn't be UFOs now, would they? If the government announces that they are declassifying documents on ET spacecraft, then I'll pay attention. Until then, UFOs are just what their name implies. Shit we have no information on. People were seriously thinking the government would release these crystal clear photos of flying saucers. Instead, we got footage from fighter jets flying hundreds of miles an hour looking at these tiny objects miles away that the onboard computer was like, well, this looks odd, better alert the pilot and track it. And of course the pilots sound intrigued because the computer that is supposed to be detecting incoming missiles and such can't figure out what the hell it just found. In other words, it found an edge case. A situation that is really rare and requires just the right variables to come together to confuse the computer. Windows Vista. Windows 8, on the other hand. Microsoft claimed One OS for all their platforms was the next big thing. A decade later, and they gave every PC a free update to Windows 10 and their smartphones are dead. Of course, the backlash started right after it was announced. 3.1, 98, XP, 7. They are missed. It was once explained to me that Windows versions are like the Star Trek movies. Every other one is good. Theranos. It was more of a scam than a flop. Wasn't that the medical device that was supposed to do everything but in reality did nothing? They claimed to develop devices that could perform blood tests with a drop of blood, basically impossible. There's a great podcast called The Dropout that covers the story well. During her time at Stanford, Holmes had initial trouble finding support from much of the faculty, as many medical experts, who told her that it's physically impossible, except for Channing Robertson. She eventually succeeded at recruiting a bunch of influential people to vouch for her, many of whom, though were reputable, were not medical experts informed of how the product worked. While Holmes claims that failure is not a crime, it's fairly suspect when she, who had reportedly oversaw the development of the product, did not understood how it operated, allegedly, despite her background. That CEO is in court now, or has she been sentenced, too lazy to Google? Still in court. For at least 2 months still. Expect a verdict in 3 months probably. I can't believe she pled not guilty after everything that happened. She's claiming mental abuse, manipulation by her boyfriend. First she was a strong, independent woman. Now she cries, I'm a poor, helpless victim. The nerve of that woman. Pure psychopath. Every single second Jesus coming prediction. The worst part is the Bible literally says you won't be able to predict Jesus' second coming. Every single second coming Jesus prediction so far. Google Stadia. Part of Google's tradition of abandoning a product if it isn't an immediate success. Which, with so many knowing about this, adopt a wait-and-see approach, thus creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of dead Google products. How about them Panama Papers? Led to the collapse of the Icelandic and the Pakistani governments, and a couple of journalists were murdered in Malta over it, with the case now in court. If you from the US, then the reason it didn't make such a big impact there is that FATCA requirements mean the route wasn't as easily accessible for US citizens, combined with Delaware being able to do most of the same thing for companies. The Icelandic government did not collapse after that. Nothing really happened in Iceland. Yeah, he resigned, but he is still in politics in Iceland. He ended up creating his own political party that has a big following. Even though his party is now becoming less popular, he is still active. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Gone by Easter. Y2K. I think my dad still has a year's supply of emergency rations in the basement. He asked my mom to start using them for meals. She said he could have them in the divorce. He never asked again. This is a big problem with society in general. Y2K, we spent the money and fixed it. So everyone was like, well, that was overhyped. What a waste of money. If we had actually prepared for coronavirus like we should have, people would have said the same thing. Y2K could have been really bad, but we spent the time and money to fix the problem. An estimated $100 billion was spent making sure Y2K didn't frick us. It very much was a big deal. Welcome to the perpetual nightmare of public health and emergency management. The public is only satisfied when a possible disaster is approximately 80% avoided. Any more successful and it's why did we spend so much money and nothing even happened? Any less successful and it's where's the people we pay to stop this shit? See also. It help desk, production support, etc. Exactly. I get mad when people say this. I worked in a bank and a credit union in the years leading up to Y2K. I first noticed issues with CD maturities in 1996. I remember the software people saying they were working on it. I didn't even know what the issue was, but soon found out. Once I became manager of a small credit union in 1997, I had to regularly test updates to our software as the coders worked on patches. This was done after hours and I had to report what worked and what didn't. Then the programmers would work some more and send all their new updates to test. This went on right up to Y2K. I also had to do quarterly reports to the National Credit Union Administration. I had to provide detailed contingency plans. A lot of work and money went into this issue for years to make it work. Well, and we've got more time-related bugs ahead in the future. There's the 2038 Unix time issue, and then Y2K was kicked down the road till the year 8000. I believe there are even more known issues that'll come up in the next 50 years. But hey, that's computer science for you. Never done, just constantly moving forward one step at a time. I'm not too worried about Y8K, quite frankly. Cyberpunk. I really had high hopes for the game beyond the promised content. The bugs are mostly fixed now, but the game still feels strangely empty despite all its style. Nothing about any of its characters felt real, interesting, or impactful. There was a very interesting premise that seemed to constantly fall on its face. Somehow, the game felt emptier to me than Fallout 4 did. Random encounters are at the least funny or connected to other plot points in FO4. The random encounters in Cyberpunk feel like badly scripted events that trigger whenever you enter the boundary of a different part of the city. I replayed Fallout 4 immediately before I finally started on Cyberpunk with the latest 1.3 patch. So I was already used to the jankiness mindset going in. It had its hits and misses in character development for sure, e.g. the characters who were built up only to just die. Although I thought most of the romanceable characters were way better than any of the companions in Fallout. Romancing Panam actually felt like there was real build-up, unlike in Fallout where they just follow you around until you flirt with them once and suddenly you're the love of their life. Cyberpunk definitely shines in its side quests though. The whole River Mission arc, the Samurai Reunion, the Sinnerman arc, the Perales quests, they were all surprisingly good even though most of the time you're just sitting and talking to people rather than shooting and killing things. It was so blown out of proportion that CDPR themselves offered refunds for physical copies. Many retailers offered refunds for physical copies even if they were opened, and Sony even removed it from their digital store. It was not blown out of proportion. The game wasn't filled with bugs, it was fricking broken. Don't help CDPR get away with a revisionist pass. We're a year out and the game still isn't even close to what was promised at launch on console. The people in here defending this piece of shit game are obviously in denial. It literally bricked people's consoles, dashed people's hopes for a game they'd been all hyped up about for 8 years, and then proceeded to insult people's intelligence with cut content and long waiting times for patches, updates. They lied upon release of what the game looked and felt like, so when it came out it had glowing reviews from critics, but when users got their hands on it, whole different story. You always get that one dude, wasn't as bad as you're making it out to be, man. I played it with no problems and the occasional bug, had a great time, don't see the hate. When CDPR tried to get Sony to give refunds, Sony took it off the store so it was unpurchasable for months. I've never known an AAA game get pulled like that. That is true. I've never heard of a game so bad that it got pulled after release so that it could be fixed. Honestly, they really rushed rather than admit it wasn't ready. I find that's a problem with a lot of games nowadays. Releasing games that aren't quite ready and then finishing them with updates. Obviously not as bad as this one, which was at least a couple of years from being ready. Prior to internet connectivity, they didn't release games like that. Either it was completely finished with little to no bugs or it went back to the drawing board until it was. Spore. Yeah, came here for this one. What I was promised was the magnum opus of Will Wright, a huge name at the time, giving you the full civilization treatment from single-celled organism up to a full space empire. What I got was 4 flash minigames in a space exploration game with all the depth of Dora the Explorer. That being said, the tech behind the creature creation was impressive, there was just very little game attached. That demo where he zooms out from the surface of a planet to the whole galaxy was jaw-dropping. But in the game there was nothing to do at that stage, except tormenting primitive aliens. They should have added a space war phase. My computer would always crash when I entered the space stage. Absolute bullshit, every time. The Zune. I still have my Zune HD from when I was a teenager, but I don't even think the software is available to download anymore lol. I still have it installed. I have not tried to see if it communicates with my Zune HD. Found it in my stuff about 6 months ago. Maybe this is the jolt I need for running additional investigation. RIP Zune though, the superior device and audio playback program. I still can't believe how crummy the iTunes interface remains. I agree that Zune was superior. It's a shame Microsoft chose not to really do anything with it, like almost immediately after the Zune HD was released. I suppose smartphones have pretty much rendered music players obsolete though. Adulthood. You can grow up to be anything is really easy to say when no one reads the fine print. We already did everything that our parents told to do, now what? Nice. You have made it to the end already. Thank you for watching. If you aren't already subscribed, please do so, as there will be more videos like this in the near future.